From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning. It's Friday, November 6, 2020. This is election day +3, and you're listening to the Macrocast. I think we're probably finally going to get some conclusion here, or at least the path to conclusion. This morning alone, we saw Georgia and Pennsylvania tip in the favor of Vice President Biden. And if these trends continue, these races hold up, guys, I think we're probably looking at a Biden administration. Of course, the other huge news today, though, from Macrocast standpoint, is we've got Jobs Day, which we always look forward to. This is Tony Fratto from New York. We got Matt McDonald, my partner at Hamilton Place Strategies, with us, as he is on every Jobs Day. And John Fagan and Brendan Walsh are regulars with Markets Policy Partners. Guys, let's start with Jobs Day, and then we have to. There's the election and all the consequences from it, especially economic policy consequences. We'll spend the rest of the show on, but let's start with Jobs Day and see what that told us. This was. There was a lot of talk about the economy. The economy was the number one issue in the campaign, tied with COVID. They go hand in hand together. We got GDP in the GDP report last week, and this jobs report maybe it may help President Trump if had it come out earlier. Do you think it might have, Matt?
I don't think so. I don't think that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that when I think about the fact that people's view in polling now, the fact that people's view of the economy is driven more by their political affiliation and who is in charge of the government than it is by economic numbers, that says to me that I don't think this would have made the difference. But, to be honest, in a close race like this, where you're talking about tenths of percentages separation, one of the easiest ways to say is that anything could have made the difference, is that, any one piece could tip it the other way. And the jobs numbers, for where we are and expectations, I think the jobs numbers are good. It's a beat on expectations. Total non-farm payroll rose 638,000 in October. Notably, the unemployment rate declined to 6.9%. I'm surprised it's gotten down this far, this fast. Just to put that in perspective, the unemployment rate was above 7% for 6 months, starting with this crisis. And when you go back to the financial crisis, it was above 7% for 5 years until the fourth quarter of 2013. So
amazing. It's an amazing statistic, actually. Yeah,
it is. I don't know if this is a V or W. It's going to turn into a W, a K, reverse square root sign, what have you. But
right.
But this
we need one of those.
This is good news.
One of those other. Maybe it's a sigma. We need like other alphabets.
A mu.
We're limiting ourselves to the Western.
I know.
Alphabet, and other alphabets have different.
It's true.
Letters. We may want to choose a Greek. There may be a Greek letter that makes more sense for this economy.
And it is interesting. So obviously the pace of job growth has slowed, especially after we went down 22 million and then you bounce back half. But if we stay at this pace, it'll be February of 2022 when we get back to full employment, which that's a far way off and it's not great. But I don't know, if you talked to me in March, I would have said, I don't know, 2030, And I'm overstating it, but you
no. Well, reminder, we're still in the middle of a pandemic.
A pandemic, yeah.
And I would have, if you talked to me in March, I would have thought that we would have had the pandemic under control by now. Exactly. And that the aftermath economically would be more substantial.
Yep.
In terms of I would have expected us to have it under control and for unemployment to be in the 8s probably.
Yeah, and more.
Neither of those things are true. So I'll just sign off now. You guys can figure out the future.
Right. And also, this jobs number is actually a little better than it sounds, because we had 900,000 private jobs, but we lost 268,000 government jobs. So we lost 138,000 in the federal, and then 130 at state and local. And at the state and local level, it was heavily in education. So the pandemic is starting to hit at the state and local level, which, knock on wood, maybe helps us get a relief bill where the pain's actually starting to happen, and it's not a red state, blue state. It's an American state.
And that really is one of the big questions about the longer tail of the economic impact. Yeah. And the initial shock, Tony, you said the medically induced coma of the economy to help fight back the acute first wave of COVID, and then the ensuing snapback. That was, that we've seen that, and going forward, I think it really has been over the last month, and the election has sort of overshadowed it to some extent. But over the last month, we've really gotten a more sobering sense of how long in reality it's going to take to get the vaccine out there, what kind of efficacy this is going to be. We're going to be living with this for a pretty long time. Dr. Fauci said it's not going to be, at the end of next year, at the very earliest, that life is going to get back to, relative normalcy. And that's a long time between now and then. And the character of the economic impact, it's no longer a shock. It's a much more slow moving and, gradual kind of impact. And that's the chronic kind of phase of this. And so it households and businesses can hold on. And certainly, we've talked about building the bridge, that fiscal bridge to the HEROES Act, and certainly this next round of stimulus will do that. But how long does that bridge need to be? And we still just don't know. And the character of economic impact will change as the timeline extends.
That's right, and we shouldn't ignore the fact that there are, we're talking about the sort of the aggregate performance of the economy. We should not ignore the fact that there are, real severe dislocations in certain parts of the economy. There have been winners and losers in this in what has happened with COVID. We do know we're getting lots of support, even with the running out of a lot of the spending from CARES Act. There's still enormous fiscal support, so transfers supporting the economy, even from natural automatic stabilizers like food stamps and welfare benefits and unemployment insurance. Those things are still supporting the economy and cushioning the blow. The other, though, is just this transition in the economy. So we say, well, it seems like the economy is doing fine. It's not doing fine if you are in travel and hospitality. It's not doing fine if you are, movie theater. If you're on movie theaters or distribution of movies. So there are, for them, it's a depression, and because of the COVID coming back, some movie theaters who have tried to start up opening have now had to go back and revert, and they're closing theaters again. So for certain
and they might never come
the
back.
Economy,
on the Disney call, Disney said that they're indifferent to how they distribute their movies.
Don't say that,
now.
Man. I'm a moviegoer.
I love movie theaters.
I know. But, don't say that they're never coming back.
Even if it's proven that
I'll pay
you can make money
price.
by just going straight to streaming, which is sad. But I don't know. If you're gonna watch an action movie, you want to be on the big screen.
Well, the point is the character, like the characteristics of the economy, there's disproportionate harm in certain sectors,
exactly.
And so we need to see those coming back before we can feel really good about where the economy is, even if the aggregate levels are okay, because delivery services are booming, right? If you're like people delivering stuff, and that may be a permanent shift, move the curve out to a permanent shift in understanding the economy. The growth in delivery jobs is going to be pretty significant, and probably some other.
So my truck needed its 5,000 mile servicing, so I went on the Toyota website and I clicked the button, and I thought I was doing it for next week, but I actually was doing it for yesterday. And in a half hour from when I clicked it, a guy showed up at my house, took my truck away, and got it serviced and brought it back. That wasn't a service a year ago.
But
You know
that's an amazing service.
There's going to be a lot of long-term changes and shifts in behavior, and that sort of stuff will be interesting. I know we've talked about it before, but the other thing is that whenever the pandemic does end, whether with vaccines or we actually get our act together, whatever, I am kind of presuming that there will be a moment of built-in stimulus when that happens. Everybody is going to go out to a restaurant in weeks after they get their vaccine or whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
And
no, the Roaring 20s. The Roaring 20s
Yeah.
didn't happen because of World War II. The Roaring 20s happened because of the pandemic.
World War One.
I mean, World War One. Sorry.
But yes, I'm
Pearl
picking up what you're putting down.
I'm gonna.
I was on a roll.
I'm gonna put a little note of caution on that. Is that we keep talking about the vaccine like it's an event, and I would just say it may not be an event, right? It may be it's going to be a rolling thing, and we work. I won't say the name of the client, but we work with a major entertainment venue, and there are really challenging questions for whether it's a movie theater, sports stadiums, entertainment venues, dance clubs, you name it, where we know that not everyone is going to get the vaccine. We also know that the virus is showing some signs of evolving. And so there are very hard questions for places that welcome people. Are you going to require, even in our workplaces, are you going to require people to show proof of having been vaccinated before they're allowed in? If you're the movie theater or the concert venue, you're going to require that. You're going to turn people away because they haven't gotten the vaccine. We know from polling, half the people say that they don't. Not going to get the vaccine. Now, we don't do that for the flu, but we also know this is much more contagious and much more deadly. So,
that's true. But to your point, Tony, that on the economy is that these both exist simultaneously at an aggregate level and at an individual level. And I do think at the individual level, whenever that time comes where it's like, okay, this, a town is COVID free, or you get your vaccine or whatever. I think that quarter, whether it's a quarter or a month or whatever it looks like, I think that period will have an impact in people's behavior because, cabin fever is real.
It is. Apartment fever is real too, as I sit here. Well, hey guys, let's. That's pretty good on the jobs report that we have, which we love and have to do, but. We got to talk about this election. Things are happening as we speak here. Why don't we take a break and come back and dive into the election results and see what that means for the future of economic policy making. You're listening to the Macrocast.
Markets Policy Partners provide sophisticated financial market analysis that is independent, accessible, and actionable for a broad audience. Learn more at marketspolicy.com.
All right, we're back on the Macrocast. Guys, as we sit here now, it's Friday. I think in a lot of ways, look, the polling in certain states was just, horrific. Once again, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, in particular, were just way off. And I don't want to get into like a deep polling discussion, but aside from that, in some ways, the election is kind of playing out in the way we could have expected, which is, Biden still it appears to be winning the states that he was most favored in, not by as much as he was favored, but it looks like he's probably going to pull off wins in Pennsylvania, which just flipped today, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Florida was a toss-up and went to Trump. Georgia, I think, is the most fascinating race in the country for what it tells us about where the electorate is going, especially in southern states, which have been reliably red for a very long time now, and this transformation of urban suburban populations in some of these states, and some people hoped it would be Texas as well this time, and that didn't bear out. That was people are early on Texas. But it looks like, as we sit here, counting is still going on in a number of these states. The day of voting went, pretty strongly for Trump. The mail-in voting went, overwhelmingly for Democrats and Vice President Biden. We're now counting those votes, and where Biden had been chipping away at Trump leads or holding on to narrow leads, he seems to be expanding, and may end up with something on the order of 290 or 306 or so electoral votes, and maybe a $5 or $6 million vote win on the national popular vote. So probably looking at a Biden administration. The big surprise, I think, the biggest surprise, it looks like Republicans are probably going to hold on to the Senate. Any other surprises coming to this from you guys?
There wasn't a lot of talk before the election about the House. There was a sense that it was going to be pretty status quo, and that was where this is an election where everybody there's enough losing to go around. I don't know if anybody really feels like a winner at the end of this as this week has progressed here. Obviously, if you're a supporter of President Trump, you may have a greater distress given the results this morning. But I think that certainly the Democrats. There's a lot of commentary on the Democratic side. It feels like not a Pyrrhic victory necessarily, but certainly one where the spiking the football moment was really denied, and the House was a big part of that. And House races, we have some folks that we are associated with in the macro world who had picked up on it, but it really wasn't in the public consciousness. So I think that was one of the big surprises. So to some degree, everybody feels like a loser after this election.
I feel like we've previously talked about it, but there was always this aspect of, the issue of the Biden campaign strategy of fundamentally running the campaign as a referendum on President Trump, which I think was the appropriate strategy. That necessarily leaves a lot of questions around what a mandate looks like after the election itself. So like if you run a referendum election on the sitting president, then just because people vote for you doesn't mean that vote implies an endorsement of policies. Though certainly if it's a landslide, any party or candidate is going to claim that mantle and interpret it as such, right? And I think that was always going to be a little bit of a tricky point on governing. And I think the Democrats kind of knew that was coming, and everyone learns the lessons of the last war. And there was like an aspect of like, okay, we're going to get done what we can get done because the midterms are coming and then we'll lose our whatever. And just none of that materialized. There's no mandate. It looks like split government is likely the outcome. I mean, it does have this quality of like, and we're still in the middle of a pandemic and still have the economic problems, and like the parties really do need to work together to figure out solutions to this stuff.
No, it's interesting. I want to ask you, Tony and Matt. So in terms of the numbers is how it's going. Biden is likely to win with basically the same amount of electoral votes and popular vote as George W. did in 2004. And in 2004, that was viewed as a confirmation of a mandate for George W. What's so different this time?
I think every single president, you win the election and you claim a mandate.
Yeah.
And that is a sentiment. And if you won some of them, very big victories like an Obama or a Clinton, had won a Reagan in '84, very, very big landslide wins, where you make claims about, the restructuring of the electorate, right? Transformation in how, the partisan breakdown, and you make these claims. Sometimes they bear themselves out, and sometimes they don't. But you always claim a mandate. You won the election. You said I ran on these things, and these are the things we're going to do. The problem for Vice President Biden this time is what Matt pointed out, which is this, the Senate and divided government. Like mandates always run into the grinder of our checks and balances, especially when that grinder involves the United States Senate. There is very little that a Senate majority leader is required to do. And he has enormous power, as we've seen with a couple of Supreme Court justices, can determine whether we're going to put something on the floor of the Senate or not put something on the floor of the Senate, even to be considered. Let alone whether you've got the votes for it and whether you got enough votes to cut off debate. So, what does that do for Biden for his claims of a mandate? He certainly ran on certain things. Legislating is going to be very, very difficult. And so if we're thinking about what's the future for policymaking coming out of this, is sort of the big legislative set pieces that you expect from new presidents, whether they won election or re-election. When in 2004 we won, we considered a mandate. We wanted to do Social Security reform and immigration reform, neither of which got done. Whatever we thought about a mandate, Congress said, take your mandate and shove it, and
what I'm going to say on that though is that the 2004 campaign was largely fought over the war on terror, keeping America safe, and successfully prosecuting 2 wars. That's what it was about, and that was the whole campaign. And then when we got into the second term and it was Social Security reform, there was just a record scratch by the electorate of, wait, what about the thing, right? And I think that's the challenge that Biden runs into too, is that look, you can't, and I don't think this is going to be an issue for him at this point because he doesn't have the option or won't have the pressure. But if he ran on a campaign of normality and restoring a sense of stability and all the rest of that stuff, is that if he had kind of taken up the progressive mantle or on whatever you want to, changing the number of seats on the court or changing the Constitution or doing away with the filibuster or just blowing up the system, I think that would have also been a record scratch moment for the electorate where they were like, whoa, we thought we were voting for the normal calm guy who wasn't going to doing stuff. So but I think to your point, Tony, on the split government, is that that's not going to happen seemingly because that can't happen. And I think we're much more likely to see, if there's going to be anything interesting that's going to come of this and responsive to the pandemic, et cetera, I think it's going to be Biden the deal maker and his relationship with McConnell and what that looks like going forward.
Yeah, that's an important point, because yesterday we had the Fed meeting where they didn't really change anything, but Powell continued to kind of warn us that the pandemic is having a negative effect on the economy and we need fiscal stimulus. Is that something we think can get done?
Well, one of the big issues here is that we're heading for potentially 2 Senate seat runoffs in January in Georgia. And what does that mean for the lame duck session? There was an idea that if you had a decent amount of clarity here, whether it was a Biden presidency or a second term Trump, there was going to be something that came through, given the urgency of the pandemic and the need for fiscal stimulus. That's that's bipartisan acceptance of that, but just a different degree. There was something that was going to come through. With 2 Senate races still up in the air, that makes it a little bit harder. It doesn't necessarily disqualify the possibility of a lame duck stimulus, but you also have the fact that President Trump is what is he going to be doing during the lame duck session? And I think that goes back to the issue we were talking about of the mandate. This is not a traditional election cycle. You're going to have the sitting president, whether assuming Joe Biden does make it past the post here in the counting, you're going to have the sitting president undermining, pretty clearly doing his very best to undermine that mandate. And anything that he can possibly do to make sure that the people who supported him are, virulently opposed to Joe Biden and see his presidency as illegitimate. That's what President Trump is trying to achieve with his rhetoric. We saw the press conference last night. He's certainly not, how's he going to spend the next few months if he can't, win the election? It's a really interesting, and disturbing question to think about, and how that changes the dynamic here.
Yeah, one of the things I've been saying, my sort of base case on things like stimulus is that because inexplicably, I don't care what anybody says, they did not get a deal done before the election. And I think it's safe to say now, looking at how narrow this win is for Biden, there's absolutely no question in my mind that if Trump administration says yes to a $2.4 trillion Nancy Pelosi plan, he is the president-elect again today. And would you throw a couple $1 trillion on the economy that would have had some of the same success that we saw from the CARES Act? Would that have bought him?
Wait, you're saying that a stimulus would have put Trump over the top?
Yes. I don't think
it's
there's any
funny
question about it.
It's interesting because like I said this about the 2016 race, and I think it might end up being true of this one too, is that there was always this question, did like the Russians cause it? Did like Hillary not going to Wisconsin cause it? Like what caused it? And in a race that close, everything caused it simultaneously.
Everything caused it, yeah.
And
but I mean, it's the first time in the history
around
of the world a president didn't let the Treasury hand out money to people before the election. It's never happened before.
I agree, and I just say, look, there's no way to prove or disprove this. I'm just saying my autopsy on this is going to be that if you had dropped a couple $1 trillion, he buys 1% or 2% in 3 or 4 states, and he's the president-elect today.
If it was done in September, October, I think you're right.
Yeah, I'll fight anybody on that, right? So, but they didn't do it. So they didn't do it. And so my base case then become, okay, well, they're probably going to do the most likely, because the economy needs it, there is going to be, for airlines, unemployment, test and trace, and a few other things, PPP. There will be something that shows, that a skinny COVID relief bill that we get in lame duck. And then come back. No, I was saying come back with the expectation is probably going to be a Democratic Senate, and a Biden administration and the Democratic Congress could then go get the bigger chunk. This throws things into question now, not least of which is not whether you can get agreement between Nancy Pelosi and McConnell on what a COVID relief package is. There's a question as to whether Donald J. Trump will sign that bill.
I was thinking that
he is obviously, he's
got other things. He's got other priorities these days.
Because he might veto it, but I don't know. If he vetoes it, then do you get enough?
There's probably
where you can get the 60 votes.
There could be, but we saw what happened. I mean, look, if you're a Republican in the House and Senate today, you want whatever Trumpism is, we know that the Trump family are not going anywhere. Donald Trump isn't going anywhere. He may announce his intention to run for the president in 2024 for all we know.
It's going to be the strangest lame duck we've maybe ever had.
So he's going to be a presence in the party, and right now, today, things could change over 2 or 3 years. Today, do you want to buck Trump if you're a sitting Republican and override his veto when you get a sense that they're taking names and keeping score? So we'll see.
With presumably a different administration coming in January, a veto override seems like an unnecessary kind of poke in the eye in the context you just laid out, Tony.
Yeah, except that the question is whether that how much damage happens to the economy over the next 2 months in that period. I agree with you 100%. In fact, I should be rethinking my guidance on this. That given where the Senate is, especially an uncertain Senate, that maybe the news that we've got on jobs, for example, also that maybe we hang on and wait and have this happen.
Well, that's interesting.
McConnell did say the other day that a stimulus is his first priority, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's.
But does the Georgia runoff?
A lot of the Republican infrastructure and leadership has been giving Trump a little bit of a stiff arm on his post-election conspiracy theories. Yeah. So, I mean, who knows? But
yeah.
But does the Georgia runoff increase the odds of a bill in lame duck? Because
so Georgia runoff context for you, just to think about this, is that I would almost frame it in your mind as like the first campaign of the midterm cycle as opposed to the last campaign of the presidential cycle. There was a Georgia runoff in 2008 when Saxby Chambliss was the sitting senator, and the turnout, and who knows? I mean, there was obviously huge turnout this year, but the turnout for Republicans in that runoff was about 60% of the general election total, and the turnout for Democrats was about 50% of the general election total. Those are, I don't know, those are more in the range of like thinking about a midterm special election context than a general election context. And you have two of them, which I would suspect the outcomes of those seats to be correlated. I know that Republicans in theory only need one of those seats to take the majority. I don't see a scenario where you necessarily get a split verdict from the two seats, which I guess, you could say, oh, Republicans only need one. I'm not sure that makes a difference. Like if Democrats are somehow able to flip them both, I don't see where a split happens. But
yeah, my guess, I mean, look, it's obviously it's going to be the most money spent on an election in as narrow a period of time in the history of the planet. So we'll see what happens, right? But your point, I'm glad you did the research on that with the Saxby Chambliss race, because that's always been my, when I look at specials, they the turnout is like, it's just really, really hard. And so if you're looking like, Democrats were not able to pull enough voters across the line for their Democratic challengers here during a presidential election year
when Trump
where the top of the ticket won the state, and still were not able to get enough to actually outpoll the two Republicans. So that likelihood that they could do that in a special election a week after, a few days after New Year's, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it. And I don't care how much money you spend. I'm just not seeing that level of turnout. So yeah, I'd be betting Mitch. I would be betting on that Mitch McConnell's still going to be majority leader, and he himself will be in a position to be the negotiator on stimulus.
And all of that context, Brendan, I would say is that I don't think that the outcome of the Georgia special per se is gonna influence the timing of the difference. Oh, we'll wait to see if we can get I don't think that's how people will make the political calculus on that for all the reasons that we just outlined.
So that's going to be, look, I mean, I still think we are in a position though, whatever I just said about what we think about where the economy is from the standpoint of the jobs report. Chairman Powell was, at an FOMC meeting this week, and, boring, unchanged on the monetary policy outlook, although some hints, which John and Brendan asked you guys about on the like where there's some QE whispering there, but he did make the most direct call again. There's always like we don't see this all the time where the Fed chair is calling for fiscal action. Sometimes they hint at it. He is more direct than any Fed chairman I ever remember, expressly saying this economy needs fiscal support. So he is certainly seeing the need for it, and so I take his word on that. And that's my sense is that we need it, and he is saying that we need it. And so I hope that Congress can get it done. What else did you get from the FOMC announcement this week?
Well, it is pretty clear that the Fed is starting to hint at and lay the groundwork for additional asset purchases as needed. And it looks like they may well need them. And this is something that when they did the big policy pivot in September, it was kind of the elephant in the room. They left it out. And it was all about recalibrating to be more aggressive their inflation and full employment targets, and using and basically pinning interest rates at zero for years to come to achieve that. And the basic reception from market participants was, you've got to work. If you set those goals higher, you've got to work harder than just zero from now until, zero interest rates from now until 2023. And so by process of elimination, this was at a time when Chair Powell was saying that the Main Street lending program and some of those other quasi fiscal programs, they couldn't solve the problem of getting the money out the door. And so that leaves one policy lever that they really didn't talk about, and that was increasing the asset purchase, quantitative easing, QE, so to speak. And that appeared in the September minutes, that they would revisit this issue and reassess the quantum of purchases needed to achieve their goals. And so this is, and it's begun to percolate in some of the commentary from other Fed officials. And it was, nothing definitive said yesterday, but it's pretty clear that in December, there may be, that opens the door for more information on that front in December. We think that there will be a signal that more quantitative easing is in train for early next year. And that's particularly in a situation where you have the likelihood of a smaller stimulus package in this lame duck session, and the prospect for, not the blue wave 3+ trillion.
Right.
And so in that circumstance, we think that QE is going to be where the Fed resorts to add their additional stimulus. It's not impossible. Certainly if there is a Biden administration, it's not impossible that they could extend the Main Street. I don't want to sound like a broken record. We've talked about this, the Main Street lending program and the municipal liquidity facility. These are huge money pots that they haven't deployed at all. And if assuming they are extended, and if there's a Biden administration, the expectation is that the Treasury Secretary would be Lael Brainerd, who's a current Fed governor. And if there's going to be any sort of formulation of personnel that gets to grips with these programs and makes them work, it would probably be a Lael Brainerd at the head of the Treasury, working with the Fed board, who she obviously knows so well, to try to get the equation right on these programs.
They've tried to do a little bit of tinkering.
Policy can't do.
Yeah, they tried to do a little bit of tinkering, right? Lowering the loan floor, right, to try to draw in more farms. So we'll see whether that has any impact at all.
And if you just loosen the underwriting standards, and if the Treasury is willing to take bigger losses, I think it can work.
Any losses? It seems like they're not
any losses. It's
any losses at all.
Underwriting.
And maybe in a post-election environment, they will be willing to do that. It would be welcome. If they're not willing to take losses, that this program just can't work. It doesn't make any sense for companies that not just take on losses. They need to figure out a way to turn it into essentially a grant maker. If you want to try to keep these businesses alive until we get to the other side, as we've said. We have something else coming up in December too, though, which is driving this. Some of this is the expiration of the continuing resolution to fund government in the midst of this also. So we have some wrapping around the COVID relief is the CR to get into sometime into 2021. In which case, you can imagine again, like whatever the government is, the composition is on the Senate, and if it's a Biden administration, there is room there and opportunity to move closer into sort of normal budgeting, where you can go to work on adding spending into the normal government programs that can also have fiscal support. Also, it doesn't have to come in the form of emergency spending. So we'll see which direction that goes as well. Let's take a quick break here. We'll come back and look ahead to see what else we have to look forward to in this post-election environment. You're listening to the HPS Macrocast.
Have you heard the news? The HPS Macrocast is expanding into the HPS podcast channel, which offers our listeners access to all of Hamilton Place Strategy's podcast shows in one convenient place. The HPS podcast channel is home to all of our new and past podcast episodes on your favorite podcast streaming services: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google, and more. If you're already subscribed to the HPS Macrocast, do nothing. If you aren't, subscribe now to have weekly HPS Macrocast episodes and the latest from HPS Insights delivered straight to your podcast streaming service. To learn more about our podcasts and other original content, visit hamiltonplacestrategies.com/insights.
All right, we're back on the Macrocast. Guys, it's like we have nothing. I mean, we've got all the news is out. I mean, we've got jobs, we've got FOMC, we've got GDP, and we got this election that's working itself out. So I don't know. Brendan, was like nothing, right? Next week
might be
big
quiet.
data.
I mean, we should know the president probably by today. And in terms of the data front, really, we get some CPI and PPI and some trade balance data, but that's about it.
Nothing big.
Nope, nothing substantially market moving. And we really come to the end of the earnings season, which held in. It wasn't particularly market moving one way or the other. So I want to put my flag down. I don't think Lael Brainerd is going to be Treasury Secretary. I think Roger Ferguson is.
Oh, well, I mean, you can't go wrong with Roger Ferguson. Roger's truly one of the really exceptional economic policymakers, or had been a policymaker, was vice Fed chair for a long time, and now TIA, CREF, and boy, what such a good man. So, boy, would welcome that. But I'm still going to keep my bets on Lael Brainerd. But we'll see. We'll see what the next couple of months will bring. Guys, thanks. Great show. Great election week and jobs day. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back with you next Friday on the Macrocast.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.